All right, welcome to Stitches and Picks. This is attempt number 3 on this episode. Today we're going to talk about processes and where we're at. So, Kristen, what's been up with you? Where are you at? What have you been doing?
Yeah. Trying to work on like balancing life right now. I'm just in that season of like dealing with illnesses and work and trying to enjoy family time and responsibilities on top of all of the other things. So I'm not gonna lie, it's been a struggle, and I have not been putting my side hustle in the front of this, but of all of it. But at the same time, I've been thinking over like when I've had a few moments to just get some brain space. I've been thinking over what I have accomplished, and I've been thinking about how the templates and the documentation that I set up for myself previous to this little hiatus that I'm on has been really, really helpful, and how it's actually making it less intimidating for me to get back into it. So in a way that can be a good thing and a bad thing. I feel like in the past, I've been intimidated to get back into something because I was like, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to like catch back up. And that's the whole thing. I don't feel that way now, but I almost feel like, well, it's so easy to jump back into. I can just set it aside. So it's this interesting like dynamic that it's a new experience for me. But I just kind of need to handle my shit before I can jump into some of my side hustle stuff. And I'll get back in the real groove of things. So right now I'm just letting the strategic processes and things of that nature kind of float around in my head when I have time. So what about you? Where are you at?
Well, it's kind of similar, and I think culturally where we live, and at the time of this recording, it's finally summer, and it was a particularly long winter for the northern states this year. So there's this like added pressure to go outside and try to reclaim some of your vitamin D deficiency. So there's definitely that, and I've been enjoying going out and playing basketball with my kid and doing random things like that. So that's been good. In terms of process, I feel you on the picking up stuff. Like a little bit ago, I finally just did sort of a confessional video for BGO where I'm like, all right, look, we couldn't catch a break since like February. We had technical issues. We had equipment issues. Then, Chris burned his thumb, like 3rd-degree burn. So he's like still recovering from it. Couldn't play because it was on his picking hand. And then, I've got the wrist injury now too. So it's just like, okay, this is why we haven't been releasing anything. I'm just going to start releasing stuff in June because, we have the content, but yeah. Well, now we do, but we had to re-figure out how to shoot stuff because we've changed process recently, and I think it's better. I feel less pressure to go through the weekly grind, which was such a thing at the beginning of the year where I was like, oh crap, it's Wednesday. I still don't have a thing. Now I got to create all these, assets and finish the video and upload it in time for, the launch time. And really, honestly, it's like, for no one other than my own self-imposed deadline. Because I want to create that expectation of, hey, there's this coming at a regular clip and on a particular day. But at the same time, to your point, trying to balance work and family and everything else. So, just kind of been working to figure out, like, I think if I can launch things, 3 weeks ahead, I don't feel that that kind of rat race anxiety.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's one of the most interesting parts about this is like the goal for this type of thing is to like enjoy it and make it be something where you can do it on your own time. And like, granted, when we're doing the 9 to 5 and also doing side stuff and you have family stuff and other responsibilities and whatnot, like it gets to be a lot. So there's this weird like investment portion that you're sacrificing something because like it's a balance, right? It's like it's not a balance. It's a sliding scale of like where you're putting energy in. And it's interesting to hear you talk about like the rat race and the grind, because like I think of two things when you talk about that. One is that when you launched, you were like setting up your like idea to have this process of having like this launch package. And when you talked about it, I was like, this is brilliant. Like this is a great idea. Cause then you buy yourself runway. So you package up like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 5 weeks worth of content for all of your channels, email, social, website, whatever you have going on. And then you're able to launch it incrementally and you buy yourself that time to like put stuff out. Just like I think with a lot of podcasts, we've talked about it where it's like people do a recording all in one day of like 8 shows and then they get it out of the way and they can do editing later. Which I think is brilliant, but also it's a different mindset. And it's like, you have to find the balance between the two because both can get really exhausting.
And there's a little bit more front end on that process too, because that's the process that Chris and I switched to just because of schedules. Like our schedules are conflicting. And so previously when we were locked down and we couldn't see each other, it was, okay, here are some topics you could cover, record the videos, send them to me, and then I'll do the post-production. But now that things have opened up a lot more, he can gig, he can start teaching again, in real life. He's out in Colorado right now doing a big summit, guitar lesson summit thing. The schedules don't align. So we basically had to sit down and say, okay, over the next 2 months, we have these 3 weekends that we can do, video recording for. And we did one of them. And so I've been, editing down, and all the stuff that I've been, or will be posting, will be from that shoot in May. Totally maxed out the memory of some of my stuff, shooting things in 4K and doing dual cam and exactly. But this is part of the process of learning stuff. But it is nice to just be able to like have a whole bunch of content and then not be like, oh crap, what am I going to talk about for Thursday? Right. You've already mapped it out. You've already done the shooting. Now you just have to finish it. Right. And then you can actually
talk about that for a second though. Mm-hmm. Like the whole, like, okay, posting on social or having an email go out on like a Thursday and you're like, I have to stick to this regular thing. And there's like 2 things that I think about for that is like your mental health of like having to like, oh my God, I have to put something out. And then if you don't actually have something strategically put forth, or at least an idea of what you're talking about that falls in line with your brand and what you're actually like wanting to aim for, you usually put out crap then. And like, people aren't going to care about that. So like, you really do have to be very planful in a lot of this stuff. And that's what I think a lot of people don't like to do. But I literally do that for my day job and I don't really want to do it for my side stuff, but like, I know it's necessary. So I just have to do it. And I think planning is a totally different mindset than creative too.
Yeah.
Or can be.
And I think that there's love him or hate him. Mr. Beast has a quote in an interview that he did. If you're not familiar with who he is, he's one of the biggest YouTube guys. And he kind of specializes in it's kind of stunts, but not really. Like, he opened 150 burger stores in one day and, documented all of it. Just go check it out. He's huge in terms of YouTube as a channel and doing well on that kind of stuff. But when he was being interviewed for a particular thing, he said, it took me like 150 episodes to figure out what it was I was doing. And so it was showing up and doing it and learning and showing up and doing it and learning. And then, he started it when he was 15 and now he's, early 20s and he's, hit the success piece of it. Now, is it a 10-year runway for everybody? No. But
is it an overnight success for anybody? No. Even if you get a viral something or other, no, that is not an overnight thing. That's a lot more that goes into that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think at least for me, because, we've talked about in various things, I forget if it's on this record or if it's an outside conversation. I think because I'm talking about guitar playing or talking about something that I'm already thinking about all the time anyway, just sitting down and plucking a topic out of the air isn't necessarily that hard, because it's like, okay, this particular idea has occupied a ton of brain space recently.
Yep.
I'm just going to talk about it. And yeah, to your point, then it kind of becomes this like hodgepodge thing. But I think there's, like everything, there's a range, right? You can be too freewheeling, and if that's a brand choice, that's great. That's your choice, right? But if you're
Choice being the word.
The operative thing, yeah, making a strategic decision about that. But on the other hand, if you're too prescriptive and you're too tightly controlled, then it won't ever be fun, right?
Yep.
So like, at least through all of my experiments and trying to do creative things, I have discovered like I can outline a plan, but then baked into that, I have to have certain elements where it's like, all right, this is improv. On these two things, you have to be really strict about what it is you're talking about. On this third one, do whatever you want. And then that at least gives me the brain space to not feel like I'm being totally tied down, but also, the space to explore something. Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a really good point about like being strategic, but you can also be creative within that strategic space. Like, and if you're too prescriptive, it does kill it. And the other thing that like, I'm thinking of social specifically, everyone's like, oh, if you post on social, you have to always constantly show up. Otherwise the algorithm's going to forget about you and you're not going to be important anymore. And I'm like, yeah, but we're also human. And eventually the algorithm's going to learn that too. So why not just teach it what you want it to learn? And if you need to take a break from it, come back to it, let people know, or don't. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, that's that can be part of your story too. And part of your strategy is just being really human. Which I think a lot of we're going that way. Our culture is allowing people to be human in every space.
Mm-hmm.
Certain
segments. Certain segments are allowing for that.
Maybe.
I think.
Maybe I'm pushing for every area.
I would be in agreement with you,
to, but
yeah. Anyway,
I know what you're referring to. I got you. Don't worry. I know.
Yeah.
It can be rough.
So, with your planning, or are you planning? Because I know you have had plans for your launch, right?
Yeah.
So tell me more about that.
So, okay. I have not been focused on my planning for launch so much as like planning how to scale initially. So, which probably like, that's the part that interests me the most. So that's what like the rabbit hole I went down. I have been telling myself, like, I'm going to launch this. I just am being really flexible with launch right now. And part of that, the reason why I'm allowing myself that space is because I know that the first pattern that I'm launching is a sweater. I'm not going to launch that in summer. Like, that would be stupid. I mean, people do it when they're well established as a pattern designer. Like, you can pretty much launch. I mean, it just depends on what you choose. And I could do it. I'm just not going to. Fall is going to be the time that I launch it, which means like, if I really was adamant about launching it in October, I would need to start to do some things right now that would be able to make it on time. I'm not overly concerned about that piece right now, because I really want to like, and this is probably where you'll need to hold me more accountable, because this is me planning, which that's what I like to do. And then I like to not do anything because that's scary. So I want to like, I have a bigger vision than just doing pattern designing. And part of that is a scalability of being able to write patterns. And I love this idea of doing it. And I know that it's not like a top secret thing, but it's like, you can use Excel to obviously use formulas, right? If you use formulas for sizing for clothing and you're designing clothing, you can essentially plug in a couple numbers, give or take, and you can essentially spit out a pattern. There's a lot of nuance there. There's some like stylistic things. There's some like communication aspects that are different, but like the numbers wise and math of it can all be in Excel spreadsheets. And so I want to like create my Excel spreadsheets for my multiple types of things that I would design, because I have like a limited portfolio that I'm going to start with. And because I love this idea of being able to be like, oh, okay, I want to do a sweater that has 1-inch positive ease. It's going to be a raglan style. It's going to be this. You get the idea, right? And then I can go, oh, I need this spreadsheet and this spreadsheet, and these are the numbers I put in. And now I have my measurements. And now I just need to write out the details about the specific stitches that I wanted to use or the other specifics to it. And so I'm kind of obsessed with this idea. And I have a bunch of other ideas of how this would like turn into a different business and evolve, but I just don't have the funds for that / like,
yeah,
that's
launch
a future fund
first. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to launch the thing first. Exactly. I gotta actually know what I'm like, have more than one use case, or 2 use cases, like actually like really get in the thick of it. So I'm getting more in the thick of it in terms of like writing the patterns right now to be able to anticipate what my end user is going to ask. And then I'm going to go on with the pattern that I have. And I will be going into testing. So there are plenty of areas where you can become a knit tester, and you basically get the pattern for free, and you buy all your supplies and you knit up the same thing that, you knit up the pattern. And if you have questions or problems, the pattern designer is right there with you along the way. And so I've got a bunch of things planned out, mapped out for how that experience would go for that person, for those people, because you ideally want like 1 or 2 of each size. And then you launch it after it's been like tested and also edited by an official tech editor. So those are some steps that I'll have to get to before launch, but
what's the tech editor piece of that?
So
that sounds like a really formal product launch process for.
Yeah, it pretty much is. So what's interesting is like, and people launch knitting patterns without being tech edited, but I would say, I think I've heard across the board in the industry, like if you do it, your pattern is more likely to have problems. And I just purchased a pattern for $5 and went, this is shit. I wasted my money. And it was $5. Like that's nothing. Right. But I was so like, clearly this person did not have a tech editor. And I did not like the way it was written. It was not clear. So I was like, okay, that was a waste of money. Now I know to stay away from that designer. But it's people actually go through training to become a tech editor, and they charge like anywhere from like $80 to $100 and $200 an hour to edit patterns. An average pattern is probably only going to take them like an hour to edit. So yeah, it's a whole thing. And a lot of people really recommend that you do it.
Yeah. I mean, there is that standardization piece of it where, there
isn't a standardization in our industry though. That's what's interesting.
Well, it's like the verified stamp on a website, where it's just like, it's just a little bit of thing for some trust in what it is you're looking at, because I've said that with the BGO site with Kristen and I. It's like, he and I know that we've been playing and teaching for 16, 17, however many years, a lot of years. Nobody else does. Like nobody on YouTube does, except for what we say. Right.
Yep.
So it's always trying to make sure like, hey, we're not just the random schmo in the basement that's only like a week ahead of you.
Yep.
We do have, some college education behind this. We have years of experience performing and teaching and writing our own stuff. Yeah. But it is trying to establish that connection with whoever comes to the site, so they know, like, and trust you, right? It's a whole thing.
It's so interesting too, because like I think this is probably across the board. It's not just your hobby industry or my hobby industry. It's like there isn't like a way to just rubber stamp something and be like, hey, this is good. Like this is super clear. And you have to just trial and error a lot of stuff. And that sucks because I feel like a lot of consumers probably get really burned out. So it might be really interesting for us to talk about how you signal that to consumers.
Well, that was one of the core things
I'm
with
really glad we're talking about this.
Yeah, that was one of the main things when, I put together the kind of strategic plan for BGO was, here are the incumbent players, right? You have the subscription websites that charge $40 a month, but they give you all access to, amazing lessons that they've been developing over 20 years. You have the magazines that really just push out industry news and, artist interviews, but they're not focused on the beginner, right? So there's that knowledge gap there. And lessons are always in the back of the magazine, and they only get like a page each. So you don't really get the context. It's just here's the thing, do it. Click the link to the video, and you can watch them do the example. But the third tier is just anybody on YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm a beginning guitar player and I know I want to get into it, how do I evaluate any of these offers? And how do I know that I'm actually like progressing through something and I'm not just going to learn just random things that don't help me support the goals that I want to reach, right? Maybe I want to play a specific song or learn a certain style. Well, there are some steps that everybody goes through. They're not sexy, but they're important because they're the fundamentals that go for everything. Yeah.
It's so funny to hear you be like, oh, they're not sexy. Cause like, that's exactly how I remember like learning instruments. But with knitting, I don't feel the same way. Cause like, you don't just learn a technique in knitting for like, to not produce anything. Like if you're going to learn a new technique, you're learning it on a garment or on a hat or mittens or something that you actually are producing. Cause you can undo it and then redo it as many times essentially as you want. So to me, I think actually that's probably one reason why I liked knitting so much, was because like, I immediately got some gratification out of it. I feel like I produced a thing, or I like had the great song right away versus like having to be like, these are my scales or whatever. Notice how I'm like this. Can you tell if they're not?
See, I've always been a technique geek. So even when I was growing up, when I was playing sports, give me one of those pitchback nets and a baseball and I'm good for like 6 hours. Or, I was always on the driveway by myself with a basketball hoop, saying
I want the end product.
I'm not going to go have dinner until I hit 85% free throw completion rate, as like a 10-year-old.
Oh my God.
Right.
That's
so
intense.
this is just my own brain. So when I got too injured to do sports anymore, I switched over to music. Same mindset.
All right.
And if anybody knows the band that's on my t-shirt, you'll know that this is very technique driven music that I'm repping right now.
We're on brand for you.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, sitting down and playing 10 hours a day was something that I willingly did for years.
See, this is interesting too, to think about this conversation in terms of like a consumer. So like, and tying back to how do you know that whoever you're getting information from, one of my ideas, and I don't know how I would make this come to fruition, but like I've actually just in this conversation, I feel like I've been able to like articulate it more, is there's always like knitting 101 and you learn basic techniques and stuff. And that can be fun or not fun. And usually you have a project at the end of it, but it's like past that, you never have like a journey where you can like there are people that will be like, you start with this pattern, then you go to this pattern, but it's like, how do you don't like the things you're necessarily producing. Right. So it'd be really cool if there was some sort of like, maybe I should do this, some sort of website where you can be like, I want to learn this technique, or like, I want to learn how to make that thing. And then it shows you like various different, like your goal item, right? And then it shows you various different patterns that you can choose along the way to get there to help you learn those techniques to get you a goal item.
What's that website? There's a particular website that I love for cooking where you can put in like, here are the 3 ingredients that I have remaining in my cupboard. What meal can I make with this?
And that exists for knitting already.
Okay. Then there you go.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. The same, like, but yeah.
It's kind of a monopoly, actually. It's a really interesting part of the industry. They have a little bit of a monopoly, and it's there are some up and comers right now too that are trying to combat some of the very interesting tea that's been spilled about everything that's it. Yeah, it's just I could spend a whole hour talking about all the things that have happened in the last 2 years for this one website. So I won't.
Well, here I can smack a TMZ logo right here, and you can start doing all the gossip.
I mean, the only people that would be interested are knitting people, and they probably already know it. So yeah. Although that might be an interesting case study to go over, like what they've had to deal with. One of their things is accessibility. So they did a rebrand of their website, and they chose colors that a lot of people are claiming. And I'm okay. So like, this is the way that I'm going to phrase this, may make it sound like I have an opinion. I do have an opinion. I just want to present this in a most objective way possible. Cause like everyone should be able to make their own minds. The color schemes that they chose, people are saying that they are now getting headaches and having readable, like can't read it, they're not having great experiences on it.
Right.
And then there was a whole fallout from that of how they handled it after that users were telling them. And like, it's fascinating because they were trying to use data to understand who was actually being affected by it and who wasn't. And then should they make a change or should they not? And then they have the option to like revert back, but you have to go in there with the current colors to revert it back. And if it gives you a headache, like there's a whole thing. So that would be an interesting case study of how a brand handles conflict or crisis, especially since they're like small entities, even though they're massive footprints. So we could do a deep dive into that someday.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. I'm sure we'd have probably a couple different use cases we could think of.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I can see your wheels turning. So I'm like,
yeah,
really
they are.
what you're right now.
Well, none of it relates to this conversation. So I'm just like cataloging some ideas for later. They were sparked by this conversation, but
Isn't that crazy how that happened? You're like, oh my God, that one thing triggered my brain into this. Like, that's why we have these conversations. I feel like, because even if I'm not super like focused on my work, having conversation with you really like makes me think about different aspects of what I'm trying to produce and look at it from a different way, which either ignites motivation in me or like allows me to come up with additional things that I just need to like track or like think through later.
Right. Yeah. The accountability is nice.
Yeah.
I think, well, so I'm just going to leave them to the side, but the things that I will bring up that aren't worthy of a whole, episode on its own, just to, acknowledge things that are going on as part of the process was, when you talk about the weekly grind for creating stuff, I think the one thing that not a lot of people talk about, or maybe there is a whole, there's probably a whole subculture of people who talk about this, but when you're doing the creator stuff, right, that you are outreaching to a bunch of people. You're trying to build a community of like-minded people. However, your day-to-day existence is you in your house.
Solitary.
Yeah, creating and writing and doing video or whatever else, which I'm totally cool with, right? I mean, I did creative writing degree, so I'm, the writer mentality is totally introverted.
I'm a bit more social than that.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I don't mind that existence, but at the same time, I've had a couple of things happen recently where, like a coworker at work apparently had a dad blog and, got featured for the work that he's been doing. And then, so I've been digging into that and I was just like, oh, I'm totally resonating with this content, even though it's, from the UK. And, so that's cool just to see somebody else, doing it and getting recognized for it. And, then we had a couple of comments on the BGO YouTube channel, one of which was in Portuguese. So of course, I had to go do
interesting
Google Translate and all of that. And it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. And it was the person saying, thank you for explaining it this way. It finally clicked. I was like, yay.
That's awesome. That's
You know,
really
so
awesome.
it is one of those, like, taking stock of those moments that you know, keep the motivation up and keep things going.
Yeah,
Are
that's a
definitely
good
important
point,
to
that
look
it's
at.
so solitary. That like the motivation, the like congratulations is all so solitary that it's like you have to have some sort of outlet to talk about it or share it. Like my sister is an entrepreneur, and like I feel like 80% of our conversations are around her business, which I do enjoy. Like 99% of the time I enjoy talking to her about it. And I know she's got like other entrepreneur groups and stuff that but she's not just like living it. She talks about it constantly too. And I totally get it. I think that it is hard to find a balance, especially when it's your only gig, to like step away from that too, because it's your survival too. But also I think important to let your brain get a break from that and let those cogs rest. Like this is you ever read the book Burnout? Highly recommend. It's geared toward women, but I highly recommend for literally everybody because it's such a good book. They talk about one of the ways to combat burnout is to rest, right? But rest to people means very different things, and it doesn't always make sense to people to like lay there and stare at the ceiling. So they talked about doing a hobby, because if you're burned out on work because you're doing that and you're stressed and there's a million things that you need to get done, whatever, if you take a break from work and you do a hobby, you're actually letting those cogs, those connections in your brain rest, and you're working out some other pieces. And by doing that, by putting your focus on something else, you're letting that part heal, that part rest, that part come off a burnout. And that piece has been so helpful for me in like my jumping in and jumping back out of like my side hustle stuff, to give myself permission to do that, to like make sure that, and actually acknowledge stepping away from it is actually important. It's not it's not neglecting. It's actually important. Granted, I am privileged enough to say to know that I have a 9-to-5 job right now that's paying my bills. So I know for a lot of people, that's a very different scenario where like, if it's their only job, they need to grind in order to pay their bills. However, I would say like, you'd be remiss if you didn't take a little bit, at least 30 minutes a day, to do something else that you love, and then jump back into the things that you have to do.
Well, and to your previous point about, you know, if you don't plan a little bit, then you'll just be producing crap. And if you're only grinding and you're only doing the same thing over and over again, in the sense of, you know, I have to launch this webpage, I have to launch this campaign, I have to do this, it's not going to be a high quality product. So it's better to step away, go work out, go, you know,
take a walk,
cook, or whatever it is you do. Get away from it, rest your brain. Like, that is the process.
In my day job. I see this in my day job. My job is to help people plan, but I see them, even when they're planning, or if they're not really engaged in planning, they're head down, go, 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 go. What's the next thing? And they basically are like in my head, like a factory worker. They're like, oh, take this piece, put it together, pass it on. And there's no creativity. There's no strategy, even in their most like entry-level jobs, where like you can think of a strategy of how to make your job easier or how to work with someone else. And if you're able to do that, like pick your head up, you're going to be happier. You're going to produce a better product. Your leaders are going to be like, holy crap, this person knows what they're doing. And that same principle applies to doing your side thing, because you're not going to have leaders. But you are going to help yourself in the long run. And I'm like vehemently, like I have done the like grind, put your head down and just like take the next thing from the next person and work like a ticket system and just keep going and keep going and keep going. It killed me. It killed my creativity, it killed my like emotional, mental health, well-being, but also like, it didn't get me anywhere.
Yeah.
I was just working hard. I wasn't working smart.
Well, you're the hamster on the wheel.
Exactly.
You
get stuck on it. And I think that's so easy to do, especially when you feel the pressure of having to make the money because of your own side hustle, or because your main gig is your own thing. And it's not easy. The way that I'm talking about it makes it sound so easy. Like, just pick your head up and like, everything will be fine.
Well, and that's the thing, because it's going to be different for everybody too. And that's the other problem of it.
Absolutely.
What works for me doesn't work for you. What, doesn't work for the next person. Which is why, like, I'm realizing with the, the new content plan that we're talking about, the batching really helps just because of, I have a hard time with code switching between all these different things. So like if I'm in the mindset of email
Wouldn't
marketing,
that be context switching?
Context switching. Thank you. Code switching is changing your language. So I have a hard time jumping from one tactic to another. Like I need to just
understandably.
It is better and easier for me to write 4 email newsletters in one go than it is to do a campaign, do video editing, go do another one. It's like, no, it has to be one lane while I do things so that I can do it. And I even have that with, guitar playing or music production. It's like, okay, this is the songwriting thing. Now I'm in producer mode. How does it sound? Was that take good enough? No, re-record it. It's all a process.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this is the end of this one due to time constraints.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for hanging around, and we'll see you on the next one. Like, subscribe,
Let us know
share.
what questions you have.
Absolutely. I would love, we have a student questions video series with Beginning Guitar Online. I'd love to have something similar here. So, questions from community or whatever else. We'll figure out a name.
We love giving our opinion.
Yeah. So like, subscribe, share, do all the things, help everybody find this. It really does help us out, and would be awesome. So we will see you next week. Thanks for hanging out, and
Bye.
take care.